Welcome to the subject of Blackout. With me, as always, is Mike from the Name Taken Podcast. And this past week, Mike, we were inspired. We saw a trailer to The Matrix 4, and we thought, hey, there's a guy who has some movies that we should watch in Keanu Reeves. And so the logical thing would be to rewatch 1, 2, or 3 of the previous Matrix movies, but we're not normal.
We're renegades. We're renegades.
We raged against the machine in Neo's honor.
Where do you go? Where do you go to?
Well,
Bill and Ted? You don't?
No, too obvious. We went to 1992's Bram Stoker's Dracula. Of course, the Francis Ford Coppola produced and directed retelling of Bram Stoker's original novel, Dracula. Mike, what were your impressions of this film before? Now, both of us saw this for the first time this week. What were your impressions before seeing the film as to what we are about to experience?
This movie remains infamous, and not because of the actual really anything happening in the movie itself, but because of Keanu Reeves' ineffective and
horrific,
pretty much like entirely off base British accent. So that was the only thing I really knew about the movie. And one of the things that I was hoping to learn, obviously, was if you could separate Keanu from the rest of it, if it was actually a good movie or a bad movie. But the only thing people talk about, Keanu Reeves' accent.
So I would agree with you that is the prime number one topic when anyone speaks about this film.
Right.
However, I do have a little bit of experience watching some film YouTube videos over the last year and a half over the pandemic. Gotten into a couple of YouTube channels, so I had some experience with people referencing or talking about this movie, but having not seen it, it was just oh yeah, that's the Keanu can't do an English accent movie.
Right.
But I expected it to be a well-liked movie because I had heard of it, and people seem to really be passionate about it.
Well, it's a great cast.
Yes.
It's a deep cast. So
I didn't know Anthony Hopkins was in it.
Anthony Hopkins.
And Anthony Hopkins plays 3 characters.
He does.
Which is a weird choice, but it was kind of funny. Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves, so they had their young hot stars. And then you had Gary Oldman, and
even in the
Anthony
supporting
Hopkins,
the supporting cast was even pretty strong too. You had what's his face, Cary Elwes, from Just Everything, just stuff that he's been in,
Princess Bride, and Winona Ryder and him both appear in a season of Stranger Things. I mean, Winona Ryder's in multiple seasons. So I thought that was pretty funny. And then Tom Waits, didn't know he was in it. He's acting his ass off, or trying to.
This is the second time we've seen a Tom Waits vehicle. Yeah. The first being Mystery Men. So apparently he was doing that shit a lot.
Was not expecting that, but the 90s was all about Tom Waits' acting career, I guess.
Tom Waits acting and what's his face? Dennis Hopper playing a really over-the-top villain.
Yeah. We should watch Speed at some point in honor of Keanu and Dennis Hopper because they're both...
And Super Mario Brothers.
Sure. Yeah. I forgot about Super Mario Brothers. Yeah, he's fantastic.
We already did Waterworld.
Yeah. I mean, we've already watched Waterworld, but he definitely... He went on a little bit of a run there after in the 80s just playing alcoholics and motorcyclists and whatnot. So
right.
So I did not know enough about this movie going into it. Let's just put it that way.
Sure. What about this? What Dracula movies or vampire movies had you seen before this that informed your approach?
So Dracula movies, I can't say that I've seen any in particular Dracula movie. Like,
Right. Okay.
I've seen a lot of pop culture that is clearly referencing either the Boris Karloff version or, in fact, like The Simpsons at one point kind of used this in particular movie to make some jokes in an episode. But like culturally, I think it was all just osmosis. I don't think I've actually sat down and watched a Dracula movie. Vampire movies, like I've seen a couple of the Twilights.
Yeah, bet.
Boy,
Are you?
I think I've seen the vast majority of like 2 of the 3 Blade movies.
Oh yeah, Blade. Yeah, like Blade. Yeah, does this stand up to Blade? I don't know. I don't know if it stands up to Blade. I
think the effects
Wesley
stand up.
Snipes had the Keanu accent.
That'd be pretty hilarious. I thought you were going to say, I wish Wesley Snipes played Keanu's role, and I'd be for that too.
Not necessarily the TV show, but you can tell that What We Do in the Shadows ripped off a lot of stuff from this movie.
Yes. Yeah, there's quite a bit in that movie that I was chuckling to myself at when it was like clearly a reference.
Yeah.
But yeah, I say that I didn't know enough about this movie because this movie was 1,000 times weirder than anyone prepped me for.
It was so weird.
It was very
it was like
weird.
Really, yeah, it was like a slasher. It was like a 60s slasher movie. Where like it's like
yeah, and then there was like
Roman Polanski directed it.
There was like 1920s like early film aspects to it that clearly Francis Ford Coppola and I guess his son was the special effects director. We're trying to do everything like in camera and do like old school like camera trickery for their special effects. So there's I think I researched that the only actual not in camera special effect is the like blue flame thingy that appears twice in the movie randomly. Everything else was done with just old school camera trickery. So there's like that like old timey film aspect to it. And then there's these bananas good and bananas bad acting jobs. The good one's done by Anthony Hopkins and Gary Oldman.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And the bad one's done by the younger actors.
Yeah, let's just agree on that now. Exactly. Okay, we're in agreement.
But then it was also really sexual. Like, really sexual.
Well, first of all, if we're going to talk about
this is a horny movie.
Well, so according to like, film and narrative tradition and this narrative trope is like problematic. It is a pretty key element of one of our most cherished favorite movies, Taken. But it happens in here where there are 2 women and the sluttier woman is the one who dies in a violent way, but the one who's not slutty gets to survive. Yeah,
and I mean that tradition continues into horror and slashers of the 1970s, 80s and 90s.
Yeah. So sexuality plays a role, but sexuality also gets punished in this movie.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Keanu can fuck though. He's allowed to just be drained by those harpies.
Succubuses.
Yeah. Yeah. Over and over again. And he's like, "Oh, this is terrible. I'm so tired." Hey, what? What's your problem? He's like, "They had their way with me." It's like they were hot though. Like, just calm down. Like, but I guess that's rape. So. But yeah, this was a bananas weird movie. It was highly melodramatic at times. Which worked when the actors were, the older guys who were absolutely knocking their performances out of the park. And then it just really doesn't work when it's Keanu trying to be super serious and just looking like Bill from Bill and Ted.
See, yeah, so like we're doing our best. Should we talk about the accent yet? Because let's
get it out of the way.
All right. What what do you think the anatomy, like, let's break down how stupid that accent is. Like, because remember, before we did this, I suggested that we did the entire episode just in Keanu Reeves accent, which is like kind of
I
like
think
there's a
that
little
would
bit
be
of
a mistaketh.
like, yeah, there's like a little bit of like Oliver Twist, kind of like, consider yourself, one of the family. Like, there's a little bit of like that sort of like naive kind of childlike, like, bloody hell, Dracula. And then there's like also just that surfer, like, really slow, kind of like stupid talking. So
Yeah, Southern California.
yeah, like, of course,
By
he's
the Dickens.
vampire.
I must have offended you.
What?
Oh, Mira, my love. Yeah, there's a lot of Keanu coming through, and Keanu is so, like, completely intertwined with how we view, like, the 80s and 90s, like, Southern California. Like,
Right, exactly. But here he is.
It's just impossible for him to put on a cheap accent like he's trying to do, which I guess he had just come off like 3 consecutive films, and the story is he's like, I just didn't want to put in the work.
Typecast it.
It's like, I just didn't want to do the work to do the accent, and it was good enough. And yeah, Gary Oldman probably hated me, but I didn't care. I was 22 or whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing, is we talk about like whitewashing in cinema, of having white actors play non-white characters, at least in the lead roles, and then the supporting roles are given to the people of appropriate races. But in this case, Anthony Hopkins, Gary Oldman, both
Englishmen.
Gary Ellis, both.
Well,
yeah,
Anthony Hopkins is Welsh, but both British.
British, yes. In roles alongside Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves, who couldn't be less British.
No,
like, it doesn't count as whitewashing, but it counts as something.
Yeah,
I think the casting. So I don't think it was even Keanu Reeves' fault. I think it was Francis Ford Coppola being like, let's cast.
Well, actually, what I heard doing a little bit of research, because after watching this film, I had to find out more about it because it was just so fucking bizarre. Yeah. But I guess Francis Ford Coppola's first pick for the Neo role was
Will Smith.
No, it was not Will Smith.
Welcome to Dracula. He's gonna do rap in the credits. He's gonna be sick.
I just destroyed your box full of earth. As soon as those women like come out in like to start sucking his blood,
hell no.
Exactly. Then they start feeling him up, and he's like, "I've got to get me one of these." No, I guess originally, well, if I can get back on track, Johnny Depp was considered for the role by Francis Ford Coppola, but the studios were just like, no, put someone young and attractive and like happening in this movie. And I guess they didn't want to go for Johnny Depp and instead went for Keanu.
Johnny Depp, because it has that sort of like really gothic vibe.
Yes. I think that would have worked better.
I don't know if we'd established that was Johnny Depp's thing yet. I don't know if he and Tim Burton were bros yet, but
they had given done Edward Scissorhands already, right? So he was an actionable name, but he apparently was not to Keanu levels.
Well, I think because then Johnny Depp went on to do The Ninth Gate, which is also kind of like a horror kind of like devil movie, and he actually did. I enjoyed The Ninth Gate. I thought it was good. The Ninth Gate.
He's usually good in his roles, except for like the last like 10 years.
Oops.
Yeah. But yeah, so I thought that was interesting, and I guess Winona Ryder got the job because she was supposed to play the same role as Sofia Coppola in Godfather Part 3, but couldn't due to a conflict. So Sofia Coppola played that role.
And then where does Winona Ryder here in the context of like Little Women and The Crucible?
So
is this before or after?
I'm not sure. I can look that up, but I do know that she actually brought this script to Francis Ford Coppola and said like, hey, this is a role I could do with you. And that's how Coppola decided to do this movie. And so Winona Ryder like booked herself this job. And yeah, good for her. And thank God for Keanu Reeves, because her performance is slightly better than his.
It is.
But also pretty poor.
So, but the funny thing about Keanu Reeves' accent is the extent to which his particular interpretation of British English vernacular sort of like colors the personality of his character and the nature of his interactions with everyone around him. Because of the way that he enunciates, something seems deeply naive about his character.
Yeah, that's a very nice way of putting reacting stupid. To the world. He sounds stupid. He sounds like an idiot.
So when he's like in
hell,
right? He's in Dracula's castle for like the first time, and for like the first 20 minutes of being there, there's like obvious shit like going down.
Yeah,
but his accent lends to the impression that he's just sort of like oblivious because he's a moron.
Yeah.
Like, oh, pay it no mind, governor.
Yeah,
like shadows trying to kill him and stuff.
Yeah, Dracula just like whips out a sword and he's like, I must have offended you. Like, yeah, motherfucker, he almost stabbed you. Yeah, and there's also visual cues that make it had to have been a directorial choice at some point. Because, like, there's a scene where Dracula shows up, is behind Keanu, who is shaving in a mirror and has cut himself. And Dracula shows up, and when he tries to, like, Neo tries to look in the mirror to see Dracula, the mirror just shatters, and he doesn't react. He doesn't react big or appropriately. He does not react to a mirror shattering spontaneously at all. And then Dracula leaves the room, and a second later, he's defying physics by crawling down a wall.
Right.
And Keanu just stares out the window like,
huh.
That's a little unusual. Don't normally see that.
So different from England.
Oh, physics must be different here. Yeah, that was interesting. And just for your edification, Winona Ryder had already appeared in Beetlejuice, The Heathers, and Edward Scissorhands as well.
Right.
But this is before Little Women, Reality Bites, stuff like that. So This is right in the beginning of her career.
What was it? The other thing about Gary Oldman goes back and forth between looking like Gary Oldman / Sirius Black, because he has like long hair and
he does look like Sirius Black.
Yep. So he's doing either that with a mustache.
I was gonna say he looks like Gary Oldman if Gary Oldman were in Rush.
Yes, he does. It's very shiny hair, very shiny,
and a big old mustache that says 1984.
Gary Oldman is also the only person in this movie to have a believable mustache. Everybody else's mustache look completely fake, except for his. There's like so many fake mustaches in this. I'm so glad. Like,
there's a lot of hair choices in this movie that we can get into.
Yeah, like Tombstone specifically. Everybody in that movie was like, "We got to grow our own mustaches," and I feel like movies like this are the reason why they were all growing their own mustaches. But anyway, so Gary Oldman goes between that, looking like Sirius Black, and then having all of this, what I've been calling Emperor Palpatine makeup and robes on him the entire time. So in all of the scenes in which he is Emperor Palpatine, like walking into a room with Keanu, I just like Darth Plagueis the Wise started kicking in my brain. You know?
Yeah, okay.
You got the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Bloody hell, I don't know.
I'm just a lawyer clerk from foggy London town. I hope Jack the Ripper don't get me, oi, governor.
Oh man. So Gary Oldman is fine. There's one background thing I want to tell you about this movie, just to paint it in a different light. But
Paint it
there are
with your brushstrokes.
you might have read this. You can jump in if you've read this. But I mean, there's tons of directors. Like, I'm sure we've entered into a new era where there are a lot of like female and male directors. So I'm sure women will get on the board soon. But historically, there have been a number of male directors that have like essentially abused their actors, and specifically their female actors, to get certain performances.
Yeah.
And like really famous examples
Like
are
The Shining.
Alfred Hitchcock. Yeah, The Shining. But also Alfred Hitchcock was rarely able to work with the same female actress twice, with the exception of Tippi Hedren, because he would abuse them. Shining, great example.
Verbally. We're talking about verbally.
Verbally, yeah. And Francis Ford Coppola also wanted Winona Ryder to be affected, kind of scared of pretty much all of her male counterparts, to the point where he was encouraging them to be really aggressive and mean with her off stage. And Gary Oldman was like, "You got it." Anthony Hopkins and Keanu Reeves were like, "I'm not doing that shit." So
that makes sense given what we know about all three of those people.
Right. Right.
Gary Oldman, great actor, apparently a real piece of shit.
Yeah. Anthony Hopkins, Keanu Reeves, stand up fellas.
Apparently some of the nicest people ever. I mean, I've seen a video of someone being like, "Oh shit, Keanu Reeves is on the, New York City subway." And then he just like gets up and offers his seat to a woman without knowing he's being filmed. He's just a really sweet guy.
Yeah.
Just don't make him do accents.
Yeah. Anthony Hopkins sent that really classy letter to what's his face after Breaking Bad. Bryan
Cranston.
Cranston.
We got there. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah. Have you read that letter that Anthony Hopkins sent praising him for his performance?
Classic. I have heard of it.
Classic.
Yeah, I had not seen it, but I have heard he just effusively praises him out of the blue for no real reason.
Yeah. So Anthony Hopkins, I mean, this is also like you can pick out any year in Anthony Hopkins' career, and he did something wonderful. We don't have to even think about the trajectory of his career. He's coming right off of an Academy Award for Silence of the Lambs, where he won Best Supporting Actor for being on screen for like less than 3 minutes total. So, I mean, he was already like legendary. So I guess it doesn't matter whether or not he was going to do an amazing performance no matter what. But we can't think about Keanu Reeves not having an amazing relationship with Francis Ford Coppola and kind of being at odds, being a young actor and sort of defying this really decorated director, and that also contributing to his performance as well.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that these troglodyte people think like, oh well, any actor of any gender, you if they're worth their salt, that you can just motivate them through giving them, oh, think about like this performance in this movie, or what if this was happening to you? Like, a good actor should be able to emote through that and find their own process. You don't have to be like yelling and screaming at people. And that goes for, we've heard multiple times over the years, audio recordings of actors screaming at stage hands and shit. That doesn't do anything. That doesn't make the process better. And yeah, these horror stories of like women being like, yeah, I could never work with Stanley Kubrick again because he made me feel like shit every moment I was on set. Like, that's terrible. The performance isn't worth doing that to a person when there are clearly other better ways of doing that.
Or we know Jared Leto, who I do as much as I can like to remark that he's a piece of shit. It enjoys these traditions.
Yeah.
Even when he's not even in a fucking movie.
I shoot that guy in a rocket to Mars in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's a Jared Leto joke. Because he's in that shitty band, too.
Man, I just want to cancel Jared Leto.
That'd be nice. But you can't always get what you want. But you try sometimes. just might find get what you need.
How about the gratuitous blood? How about like the bright red?
Speaking of The Shining, the blood is pretty funny, but also like the buckets of blood that are thrown at the
into
slut.
the room.
Like clearly just like 4 guys off stage just throwing buckets of fake blood.
Or when she's like just shooting blood out of her mouth at Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, it must be that time of the month. Yeah. We've all been there.
I definitely picked up on like anti-feminist sort of like menstruation track to that too.
It did. Yeah. It did kind of feel like that.
It really felt like that. So yeah, that was like fucking bizarre because it wasn't like fake blood. It was like bright red, like paint blood. Like it was like a 60s kind of like. I'm trying to think of a comparable movie. Like, I mean, I was saying like Roman Polanski, like a Roman Polanski movie. Like,
well,
like
in some of my
Macbeth.
Yeah, in some of my research, they were calling it like Italian giallo films, like the
yeah, absolutely,
like hyper saturated like reds and stuff, and that especially when in the scene that you're talking about where she's spitting up blood, she is in white makeup to make herself look like a corpse, and she's in a great room and she's wearing all white, and then there's just this
blood red.
Yeah, everywhere. This unrealistically crimson blood. Yeah, it's definitely a stylistic choice that, like, again, there's like all these weird things. Like, I guess so some of the costuming in this, like when they're in the 1890s or whatever it's supposed to be taking place. Yeah. The costuming is, I'm sure, period accurate. You know, whatever. It's not super hard to do that stuff. London in the 1890s was not some undocumented place.
No one was even alive then.
Everybody was dead. And that's what people don't remember about it, because they were dead. No, but like the costuming for Dracula, for Dracula, is some of the most bizarre and like crazy shit. Like his suit of armor at the beginning in the 1400s, where it looks like a metallic suit of armor in its construction, but it's just like this ribbed, again, highly saturated crimson red, and it almost looks like a flayed man. Like it looks like musculature. I thought that was really stunningly cool.
That was cool.
And I thought, like, obviously it's iconic now, but his big like butt hair.
Yeah, I love that butt hair.
And his like crimson robe that he's wearing, which again, that's like what The Simpsons referenced, and how I recognize that that came out of nowhere, because I guess the costume designer was a Japanese person.
Yeah, I can see that.
Who did not have any idea who Dracula was. And so he wasn't doing, or she wasn't, I don't know the gender of this person. But they weren't going on like Dracula history or Transylvanian history or whatever. They were just like, well, this would look cool. And it is sort of kind of like Eastern inspired and more abstract. And then you get into the present time, and that helps clash, because it's not realistic period and realistic period. It's like kind of like hyper stylized, and then like pretty normal period piece type outfit. I thought that was cool, but man, like we gotta get back to this. This is a super weird, super horny movie.
Yep.
Where, I mean, succubuses are trying to tug Neo off, and
he's like, excuse me.
Girls are fucking werewolves, and at the end of the movie,
blood's
like
everywhere.
Gary Oldman like slices open his chest, and Winona Ryder's just going to town on him, like she's like, you know, drinking milk out of a teat. Like this is a weird, wild film where there were multiple times where I like paused it and was like, what the fuck was that?
And then also, like, it resolves in the end, spoiler, where Dracula and that chick who committed suicide both like go to heaven. Like, I don't think you can go to heaven after all that shit, you guys. I think you like.
Did you take that as they went to heaven?
I did. What did you take it as?
I took. So I think Mira lives at the end.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
her
she
curse
lives.
is dropped.
Yeah.
But I also think it's very funny that like we have like these 5 male characters who have been very central to the plot right up into the end of it. And then we kill one of them off, and then we go to the Dracula scene, and the movie just ends. And so we don't give a shit about those guys anymore, which
Fuck
is
'em.
very funny.
Yeah.
Because they're not important. What this movie turns out to be is a tragic love story, where you almost kind of don't completely hate Dracula, even though he, is the devil incarnate and drinks
also a
blood
cautionary
and
tale.
murders people and all that shit.
About stabbing a stone cross with a sword and then drinking the blood that comes from that cross.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Don't.
You should know. Don't do that. But don't do that. So at the end, I took it at Dracula gets relief from his misery of eternal life. Like, he's got to be with his love one last time. And like, now that he's clearly about to die, basically gets to have this one last moment of catharsis and then just dies eternally.
Sure.
I didn't take it as he was rewarded. It felt like, to me, I took away from the movie that like God, assuming that he's real in this movie, because he can make stone crosses bleed. God feels pity on Dracula and allows him to perish forever, as opposed to eternal heaven or whatever.
Well, God was a real dick to that slutty chick.
He was. He really was. She just really liked that guy's big throbbing knife.
She did. There were a lot of comments on big knives. Also, Anthony Hopkins at one point is like, he says Bowie knife in a really strange way that I can't replicate.
Bowie? David Bowie? It is interesting to me, though, that like how you kind of view Dracula and vampires in pop culture, at least before Twilight, was very unsympathetic. You know, vampires are usually just the bad guys. They're monsters that try to suck
Interview with the
blood.
Vampire.
I've never seen that movie.
What about, and the movie that came directly from this, Mel Brooks' Dracula Dead and Loving It, with Leslie Nielsen.
Also have not seen that movie.
The forgotten Mel Brooks movie. Between Spaceballs and Men in Tights.
It certainly is forgotten.
Men in Tights? Yeah.
I think Men in Tights is late 90s. Because Dave Chappelle is in it, and Dave Chappelle is only so old.
It was 1995. It was Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah.
We should watch that one.
That is an option. But yeah, I found it interesting that while clearly evil,
yep,
there is sympathy offered to Dracula.
I guess.
I mean, he just wants to be with his wife.
I mean, I think that in Western movies and just sort of like in Western storytelling, they're like, redemption can be used as this like really cheap conclusion, even if like characters haven't really changed at all, right? Like Darth Vader spent really long time just like slashing a bunch of fucking Jawas and shit, and presumably
that was Annie.
Lots of Gungans.
Annie did that.
And then he just kind of gets redeemed at the end, so it's like, it's okay, he's a Jedi, he can hang out with Ghost Yoda, he's
Force
cool.
Ghost.
Yeah. So it kind of, but there's other movies that do the same thing where it's like, I feel bad right before I die. So that like, I find that type of like relief or redemption of like, but you know, they were self-aware or they had the capacity for compassion. I find that to be cheap. But
yeah, and
just me.
I agree with that. I just didn't see it as redemption. I just saw it as how I took the ending away was just that he lost, but he got some sense of closure. He was still a monster, but it wasn't his fault that his original wife committed suicide. It was trickery,
Right.
And he was a man of God before that. And classic Turks. Yeah. This movie's Islamophobic. We need to talk about that. But yeah, and then like he's not less bad. It's just the one thing that he's doing here, trying to pursue his one true love. Although you can kind of say like all of this is negated because he's kind of like forcing Mira. The movie isn't clear on whether Mira is genuinely in love with him because she like remembers a past life or something, or if he's just like using his vampire powers, which are not explained at all. He just like every time he does something new, like he turns into a giant human bat. Like that's never explained, and it like he can also turn into a werewolf. And like I guess all of this stuff is in the original Dracula book, but he just has too many powers. Too many things are going on.
Yeah,
he can turn into a green mist.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, but yeah, I just saw this ending as like, yeah, he's a monster, but monsters can love too.
I guess.
All right, Mike, why don't we take a little break here and we'll wrap up our discussion on Bram Stoker's Dracula. Next week on Subject to Blackout. Continuing our journey into the Criterion Collection, Mike and I have decided to watch the critically acclaimed 1989 Spike Lee joint, Do the Right Thing. Do the Right Thing is the film that put Spike Lee on the map in America. His now classic style of combining drama with comedy as well as biting social and political commentary firmly crystallized during this late 1980s cinema classic. While this is his third film, Do the Right Thing is considered a seminal work, receiving numerous accolades including Academy Award nominations, preservation by the Library of Congress, and vast critical acclaim. Do the Right Thing visits a Brooklyn neighborhood dealing with the racial tensions between African American and Italian American communities in the late 1980s, and the comedy and drama found therein. Neither Mike nor I have seen this film, so won't you join us before next week's podcast by streaming Do the Right Thing, now available on Netflix or the Criterion Channel. All right, Mike, now that we have finally watched Bram Stoker's Dracula, this is one of the films where I kind of genuinely want to know, did you like the movie and would you recommend the movie?
You know what? Like, I liked it more than I expected to. I expected it to be like... I expected it to be trash, but it's like it's kind of like campy and weird, and like I'm okay with that. I think it was a little bit long,
yes,
but it was like fine. It was fine. I don't know if I would recommend it necessarily unless somebody. I would recommend it to understand a project like What We Do in the Shadows better.
Yeah.
Or I would recommend it for somebody who was all about like vampire movies or like gothy type movies, and they already exhausted all of like Tim Burton's movies. I wouldn't recommend it for someone who like Keanu Reeves.
No.
So that's where I would put it.
I'm with you. I enjoyed this movie. Again, there were several times where I had to pause the movie and be like, what the fuck is happening? This is so weird. But I think there's some really cool like shots. There's some really cool special effects, like especially Dracula's shadow and some of the like the clear miniatures that they don't care that they're miniatures because it just like looks cool and old school. A lot of that stuff is really pretty and entertaining, and just like look at how they chose to do this. And I think just like you said, the movie's about 20 minutes overstuffed, but it is trying to stick pretty close to the original story. So I don't know how much you could lose. Maybe you could combine a couple of those suitor guys into one character, or two instead of three.
This would have been a trilogy if they made it right now, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it would have been the Keanu thing is the first movie introducing Dracula. And then the second one is he goes to London and then at the end we get Van Helsing. And then the last one is Van Helsing versus Dracula. And it's 9 hours and they stink and no one goes to see the last two. So I'm glad this is one movie. Because I would never watch 9 hours of this. But 2, I thought the music was super cool.
Music was good.
And I thought this was clearly a well thought out and structured film by a director who maybe doesn't have a message, but had a clear idea of what he wanted to do with the story.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, the younger actors do not work. But Gary Oldman's performance and Anthony Hopkins' performance absolutely make this thing 100% worth your watch. If you're trying to expand, Halloween's a month and a half away. If you're trying to expand your horror palette without liking scary movies, I don't like scary movies. I will watch this again at Halloween. It's super fucking weird, but it's also kind of like goth and horror based. But yeah, this is not a must-see film. But yeah, I mean, if you want to see Anthony Hopkins rock the shit, who's one of my favorite actors, and I will watch almost anything he's in. Yeah, this was a fun movie that I was expecting kind of to be a drag, but I rather enjoyed it.
I agree. Yeah, like I said, it was fun. It was fun. I was not disappointed that we did this.
Neither was I. Well, that does it for our discussion on Bram Stoker's Dracula. Mike, has there been anything else this week that you have been pop culturally consuming?
I finally got around to watching that Malice in the Palace documentary.
What'd you think? I watched that a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I was drawn to it because I remember that event itself. It also definitely like occurred in a time in basketball where a lot of the personalities from the late 80s through the 90s were retiring, and there was like kind of like a new generation sort of developing. I definitely remember the media interpretation of that event being just that all of the ball players were thugs. So basically if anybody doesn't know, so it was like 2003.
There was right around there.
A Pacers Detroit game, because like whenever like dumb shit happens, like fights happen in basketball, it's like always in Detroit, and Detroit's always involved. Like, 'cause people in Detroit are trash. So it's just like Pistons are trash. Fans of the Pistons, all trash.
Yeah,
so
fuck Detroit in general.
Fuck it. So right at the end of a game that the Pacers were crushing, a handful of different things happen. A fan ends up throwing a drink at Ron Artest, and there's like a gigantic brawl that has to be cleared by the police, and like all of the Pacers starting players are like banned for a large portion of the season, and Ron Artest was banned for like the rest of the season. It was like in the first 2 or 3 weeks of play of like the regular season.
Yeah, it was very, very early on.
Yeah, so it was interesting to look at the aftermath too. I forgot about Jermaine O'Neal. I forgot about him.
Yeah.
It's good also, like it reinforces, first of all, that there's ways to do like a measured documentary without necessarily being like an apologist for either side. Like you can revisit and be critical.
Yeah.
So you can still talk about how Ron Artest didn't necessarily get a fair shake, but still demonstrate that Ron Artest still kind of a dumbass anyway.
Yeah.
So it was actually like kind of a good, thoughtful presentation of the events and the facts and the people. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think it's like maybe just over an hour or two, so it's not
just over an hour.
Yeah, it's not a giant time commitment. And I think it's well worth the watch if if you're a sports fan or if you're just interested about the event, or if like you and I remember the next morning sitting in a classroom in high school and having the teacher throw on ESPN in first period and just basically have it in the background of the class all day, or all period, I should say, and just kind of talking about it. And much like the documentary goes into, the immediate spin, instead of why were fans throwing things, why were fans on the court, where were the police, where was security, immediately everything just went to these people are thugs and they need to be kicked out of the game. And that was my teacher's perspective at the time, and that was kind of my perspective at the time. It just was so immediate that let's blame these guys. And it didn't occur to my 17-year-old 16-year-old brain to think a little bit about, like, well, why was Jermaine O'Neal able to punch that guy? Because that guy was a normal fan and he was 50 feet onto the NBA court. Like, why was he allowed there? And it really does, like, Ron Artest probably shouldn't have ran after that guy and tried to punch him in the face. Yeah. That's probably a bad move. But also,
or laid down in front of that other guy.
Ron Artest had a lot of issues in his life. This is shortly after...
and Ron Artest knows that.
Ron Artest has recovered. Ron Artest has recovered very nicely from this on a personal level. Ron Artest is in a much better place. I mean, he would talk about his first couple of years in the NBA before he got traded to the Pacers. He would go across the street from the United Center when he was still a Chicago Bull and just buy a bottle of liquor and drink it and then go back to the game and like warm up, and then the game would start and he'd just be hammered. So like the guy had substance abuse problems, he had emotional problems, he had a very tough childhood by all accounts, but he's recovered pretty well. Multiple NBA champion and well liked, and changed his name to Meta World Peace for a while to try to engender some world peace into the world. But no, like, everything about that kind of made me reconsider, like, why did we immediately blame the players when what happened was clearly instigated by fans? And you see videos more and more on the internet of fans getting out of control and fistfights starting. And now that sports have come back in 2021, post-COVID, with fans, those videos are kicking up again of fans of the same team punching each other in the fucking face in the stands, or punching somebody else from an opposing fan base in the stands, or just heckling each other, or jumping on the field and running across, like all this shit where it's like, why don't we ever turn the camera back on those fans and say, like, no, you're the fucking problem, is none of this would have happened if you weren't throwing shit, if you weren't yelling shit, and if you weren't where you weren't supposed to be. I thought it was a very good documentary because it made me reevaluate how I felt about something that, like you said, was a very memorable part of my childhood.
Yeah, no, that's a good take.
Well, Mike, I have been doing something, speaking of revisiting, I've been doing something that I found out I hadn't done since January.
You took a shower.
I took a shower. No, I could have taken a shower in the video game that I played, because I have revisited Cyberpunk 2077 in the Keanu-sance of this podcast.
Is there something different? Did they do anything? Did they change anything?
So there were supposed to be bug fixes, and there's like free DLC content, downloadable content.
Is it good? Did you start a new character, or did you?
No. Okay. So I continued with my character, and I'm pretty close to the end of the plot line in the actual narrative. But there's still I didn't realize how close I was to the end until I'd actually finished the game. And they're like, you finished poorly. Do you want to restart before this, this thing happens? And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. So I'm at that point, but I'm like going back and like doing like the gang stuff again. Like, cause you can just like go, stop crimes
until you
from
go
being
up that
committed
elevator, you can still fuck around.
Yeah. And so I've been just kind of doing that and playing the game around. And for a while I was like, all right, this is way less, I didn't have horrible bugs. I'm playing it on an Xbox Series X. And there were not as nearly as many bug issues with the latest generation as there were the last. But disappointingly, like the game is still like it feels 50% of the way to being fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's never.
But there's that 50% where it's just like I was doing this mission where I was kind of in like the desert, so I was far away from the nearest road.
Yeah,
and I turned around. And I could see the road in the distance. And one of the criticisms of the game when it was first released was that, like, no AI was ever around. And if you faced in one direction, no AIs were anywhere in front of you. But then you'd turn around, there'd be a car right there. Like, even if you had turned around, 180, 2 seconds earlier. And so I was in the desert. And I was looking back at this road. And, like, ants in a cartoon marching toward a picnic, there was just a car equally spaced out along this road. I was like, I've never seen that much traffic before. Maybe they fixed traffic. So I got in my car and I went to drive closer to the road. And the closer you got, the cars just disappeared. And I was just like, oh, that's disappointing. And then at one point, like, I got a message and I, like, clicked on it before I, like, the whole, like, you get a message notification, you get, like, a headline that pops out and it kind of, like, types out. One letter at a time. And I like pressed it too fast and the game just froze. and I was like, well, that's not a good sign. And it took me like pausing and unpausing and doing a couple things for like 4 minutes before it finally like unfroze and kicked back in. Like I couldn't move my character, but like the radio and shit was still playing. So I could hear the game was working. And then there was another instance where just like, every once in a while when you're trying to attack a gang, they can like try to sense you. And I killed the entire gang that I was like beating up their facility to steal their money or whatever. But like the whole like, hey, they're sensing you bar just stayed on my screen making noise for 35 minutes. And I was just like, what the fuck? And this is supposed to be the fixed version of the game. And yeah, it's like a lot of it is very fun, but it's very repetitive if you're not doing the storyline. And it's very frustrating with how like 7, 8, 10 years ago aspects of the game feels.
Yeah. My favorite glitch that I had that I've been thinking about going back to playing The Outer Worlds, which was great. And I totally suggest that. It's on sale right now for like $4.
Wow.
But my favorite glitch from Cyberpunk was that occasionally when you would try and call your car to you, it would drive to you. It would just start doing donuts. You wouldn't be able to get inside. And there would be times where I would call, like my car would be like 300 meters away, and I would call it. So you can't see it right away. You can see like a line on a map coming to you. And I saw it stop, and then the distance away was like 198, 199, 200, 201, 200, 99, 98. And it kept going back and forth. And I was like, somewhere this car is like just doing donuts on this map. It's never going to come to me.
Yeah, my thing with the car was that like day one playing it, I called for the car like right outside of the character you play as V. Right outside V's apartment, and I called for the car, and I was like looking to the right, and then I must have walked into where I called it, and the car ran me over and killed me. I was like, and it didn't really mean anything. It's not like I had to like restart from the beginning or some bullshit. But yeah, it was just like stupid. Like, why can the car kill me? The car shouldn't be able to kill me. It's my car. I'm calling.
Right.
What is it? A Tesla? Commentary. So that is the pop culture I've been revisiting this week, and there's ups and downs. I mean, like I said, there's aspects of it which are really fun, but it's never going to be the game we were promised.
Right.
But Keanu's still bossing it, so Keanu is way better in that video game than he is in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
And he's American in that video game too.
He's fucking badass in that video game. All right, Mike. Well, that does it for this week on Subject to Blackout. For those of you listening along, you can head on over to subjecttoblackout.com, where you can reach out to us and you can find links to all of our socials, including Instagram, Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Also, feel free to rate, review, and subscribe. And lastly, you can find Mike on Instagram and Twitter at Name Taken Podcast. Mike, I want to thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Excellent.
Go up now.